¿Qué os iba a decir? Vale, muchos estáis diciendo, las drogas, las drogas, las drogas. Hay una cosa para los que vengáis de nuevas al stream, muy curiosa, que de hecho igual lo vemos ahora. Por lo visto, para hacer el juego, el equipo de Hellblade, que creo que son 20 personas, no son muchas, estuvo haciendo entrevistas y hablando para que les ayudaran a desarrollar el juego y hacer a Senua. Estuvieron hablando con pacientes de psicosis, gente que tiene psicosis o esquizofrenia, ¿de acuerdo? Para ver lo que sufren día a día, con lo que tienen que convivir, y así poder hacer a Senua más realista, con todo el tema de las voces, de las visiones, etcétera, ¿sabes? Vivir en una pesadilla en algunos casos. Imagino que hay diferentes grados, pero bueno, esa parte está bastante guay, la verdad. Lo siguiente contiene spoilers, recomendamos verlo después de completar el juego. Espero que tenga... Melina Jorgens creo que es la que hace de Senua. Espero que tenga subtítulos. ¿Y no se puede poner a pantalla completa? No, no se puede. Vamos a verlo.
And we only see what our inner eye creates for us. Is this what hell is? A world shaped by Senua's nightmares.
Ah, sí, vemos a Hela al principio del juego también, en esta escena. Acabo de darme cuenta. Pensaba que la veíamos por primera vez al final, pero no.
Because if you believe that Senua's reality is twisted, you must accept that yours might be too.
La psicosis de Senua.
Hellblade,
vale,
Senua's Sacrifice is a video game about Senua, a Celtic warrior on a vision quest into Viking territory. But what sets our hero
Para que digáis
apart is that
que no
she
os cuido.
suffers from severe psychotic mental illness.
¿Hemos perdido los subtítulos? ¿Por pausar? Dime que no.
The original idea for Hellblade was to create a classic hero
¡No me jodas!
a journey of suffering, but one where the fantasy world is not another planet
Ahora,
or
gracias.
universe, but a world that is constructed in Senua's mind.
Vale. No rayéis.
But to do so would mean putting psychotic mental illness at the center of the experience, a subject that is still considered taboo, and a challenge that was both terrifying and exciting in equal measure.
Ahí los tenéis,
In
ahí los
Hellblade, the
tenéis.
starting point was a newly discovered Celtic goddess called Senuna in Ashwell, Hertfordshire.
Una diosa celta
When
llamada
first
Senuna.
discovered, her name was thought to be Senua, a name which I liked and kept. I wondered if Senua might have been a Celtic warrior like Boudica, who stood up to the
Boudica.
Romans.
Boadicea.
While the Romans had conquered all of Europe, there was a group of Celts up in the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire that could not be conquered, the Picts. And so the Romans built a wall, called Hadrian's Wall, that spans across Britain from sea to sea to keep the Pictish barbarians at bay.
Capullos que sois.
The Picts were known for their war paint, painted on with woad, and their matted hair clumped with lime. And so Senua would be a barbarian Pict in this image.
Está hablando del el poblado de Senua.
Senua.
Concreto de celtas.
I don't live how much.
Oh, Zeno's daughter.
I have to go.
Wait.
Orkney is off the coast of Scotland and was inhabited by the Picts, steeped in history and mystery, and so I made Orkney Senua's home and set the stage for a crisis. In the late 8th century, the first Vikings landed on the Orkney Islands. The population of the Picts crashed thereafter, replaced by the Norsemen of the 9th century. Were they wiped out? We don't know for sure, but it would seem likely given the reputation of the Vikings. The Northmen's brutality is legendary. High-ranking leaders and chieftains of the
Llegaron los
tribes
vikingos
were often offered as sacrifice to their
a las
gods.
costas
The most
escocesas,
brutal
ha
of these
dicho, ¿no?
sacrifices was known as the Bloody.
El águila de sangre. Esto es lo que os he comentado
I
antes.
imagine Senua as a young female warrior who returns home from exile to find her partner, Dillian, brutally sacrificed to a Norse god by these hellish warriors from a faraway land. I imagine the horror of this moment and how it would have dragged her deep into mental torment.
Imaginaos llegar y encontraros a vuestra pareja, que le han hecho una de las torturas más chungas que se conocen.
I came to learn that the Celts had a sophisticated and nuanced perspective on the nature of mental disorder. One term they used was Gelt. A Gelt is a man or woman who has been driven mad by a curse, battle trauma, or grief. The Gelt would take to a life in the woods in search of penance, punishment, and purgation. And so Senua became a Gelt, cursed by darkness, looking for redemption in the wilds. Another word the Celts used in reference to mental disorders was truth, meaning fool, or liar, one who utters the words of God. They tell of the mad sinner who flees battle into exile and takes on a beastly nature, growing feathers on his body. The character called Truth in Hellblade is based on a little-known person called Findan, an 8th century Irish Celt who was captured and enslaved by the Vikings, but eventually escaped to Orkney where he became a monk.
I will tell you my stories of hell, if I may walk with you.
Upon meeting Senua, it would be his stories that fuel her quest deep into their world of gods.
The Northmen say the world will come to an end. The sun will grow black, the earth will sink into the sea, the stars will disappear, fire and water will meet, flames will play against the sky, the heavens and earth and all the world will be burned, all the gods will be dead, and the warriors of Valhalla and people everywhere. Senua, prepare yourself for Ragnarok, for it is nigh.
Esto es lo que quería
So
ver
the
yo.
stage was set for a new adventure, a journey into the Norse underworld called Hell, a vision quest fueled by madness and myth, a fantasy that was created by Senua's own mind, and one that we would experience through her eyes.
This is your mission.
Así es como hicieron el juego,
This is your quest.
los que no lo supierais.
Nothing else left.
To make a game about a warrior with psychotic mental illness as its
cinemáticas.
central theme was fraught with danger. Mental illness such as psychosis is still taboo and rarely acknowledged in a century of cinema, never mind the new medium of games. Where it does feature, it often conflates psychosis and psychopathy associated with a lack of empathy. It is unfortunate that these two words sound so similar that they are used interchangeably in media. I must admit that I didn't have to look very far to discover my own ignorance of the subject. So we reached out to Paul Fletcher, psychiatrist and professor of health neuroscience at University of Cambridge.
Psychosis is a descriptive term, and it refers to having a loss of contact with objective
realidad
reality.
objetiva.
So it's characterized by two main sets of symptoms. One of them is hallucinations, where somebody experiences perceptions when there is no actual objective thing out there to perceive.
You're already dead. Who are you?
And the other is delusions, where somebody comes to very often bizarre, unpleasant, frightening beliefs when there's no good evidence in favor of them.
There's no doubt about it. The source of the darkness is in Helheim. And the goddess Hela holds his soul there.
We reached out to Welcome, a biomedical
Aprende con
research
Laza.
charity that spends billions on research and
Me parece
awareness
súper
programs
interesante
aimed
esto,
at improving
sinceramente.
health.
Mental health hasn't always been presented in the media in a way that is particularly helpful. It can be challenging to engage people with the subject matter, and there are a lot of preconceived ideas about mental health, and particularly schizophrenia and psychosis.
Esquizofrenia,
So we hope our
psicosis.
support allows the team to continue to collaborate with Paul Fletcher and with those who have experience of psychosis to create a game that provides a fresh perspective on the condition and allows audiences to engage with it in a way that just wouldn't be possible in any other medium.
What started out as a brief consultation convinced me that we were only scratching the surface of an immensely deep and interesting subject that could enrich and change the very nature of the game.
That's cool. Thanks so much for coming here.
Pleasure, thanks. It's really interesting for me. I'd love to be involved. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Our Our understanding of psychosis is still very much a mystery, and ways of treating it are still primitive compared to physical illness. After all, it is easy to see the pain and suffering caused by physical diseases or physical trauma. It is not so
Son muy
easy to see
diferentes
the
las
mental
enfermedades
suffering and trauma of
psicológicas que
severe
las
mental
físicas.
illness. But what if we could find a way to see it? Games are capable of drawing you in for hours on end, playing the role of a character who is different from you, experiencing their perspective, and actively involving you in a world that functions with a different set of rules.
Eso es verdad. Más fácil, digamos, explicar o
If we were
enseñar
to
a alguien
represent Senua psychosis, we would have to simulate
la
voice
psicosis
hearing, a common
por medio de un
attribute.
juego.
But how can we simulate something we have no first-hand experience of? Professor
Que por
Charles
un-
Fernyhough,
por
a
cine
leading
o por-
expert in voice hearing from Durham University, offered his help.
Leyendo un libro,
Hearing
¿no?
voices is an experience that is usually associated with severe mental illness, and crucially we know that hearing voices is a part of ordinary life for many people who don't meet the criteria for mental illness.
Yeah. Oh, that's not him in real life.
We know voices vary according to where they appear in space. Voices can appear far away in the distance, they can appear right there in your ear, they can seem to be coming from inside your head.
Based on the information Professor Fernyhough provided, I put together a sound brief and invited some actors to the studio. We recorded the actors using a binaural microphone, which records the 3D spatial position of sound, replicating the way sound is heard.
Estas son las hijas de puta que han estado todo el juego hablándome a los oídos, ¿no?
The person you are listening to is right there beside you. Rachel
Hostia, qué
Waddington from the
rabia.
Voice Collective came to our studio with 2 young voice hearers to speak to our team. We talked at length about their experiences, and they listened to our tests, giving us feedback on how we could improve on it.
Everyone hates her. She's cursed.
It's very hard to represent what this experience is like, partly because it's such a personal, intense, emotional experience. It's testament to how Ninja Theory have been listening to what the researchers are saying, but also crucially listening to the experts by experience. What they've come up with is so compelling. It's by far the best representation I've heard of what these experiences are like.
Other common attributes of psychosis are visions and flashbacks. We met with Recovery College East, who work with and care for people recovering from severe mental disorders. A group of service users gave us their first-hand account of what they experience.
Sometimes when the visions or what we're seeing is too much, it becomes more difficult until eventually...
Los pitidos me rayan un montón.
The people we spoke to, the stories they told, were fascinating, harrowing and mind-boggling. The reality of what people experienced was vivid, far exceeding what I could possibly have imagined. We went away itching to represent some of these visions and flashbacks in the game.
As we all know, my heart is so, love is so far away. Don't you know how I wanna feel?
La verdad es que menudo trabajazo de investigación por parte de los desarrolladores. Investigación y estudiar todo este tema. Se lo han currado. El chat se calla, están concentradísimos. Así me gusta. Todo el mundo pega a la pantalla. Buenas noches, servilleta. Suerte en el teórico del examen de conducir. Vale, estos son las declaraciones, las palabras que salen, ¿vale? O sea, las frases. Son las declaraciones de se supone, gente que sufre de psicosis. Se ve como que las paredes o... como si se disolviesen y tal. La mente se pone en blanco y a veces se desconecta. Y están poniendo los ejemplos dentro del juego, ¿no? De cuando ocurren todas esas cosas. Que sufre alguien con psicosis. Pocos juegos se disfrutan tanto en comunidad. La verdad es que sí. Les enseñaban el progreso, además, para ver si les parecía bien o no.
With their help, flashbacks, visions and changes in perception were woven into the story and gameplay of Senua.
The students that are involved in this project are incredibly excited about being involved. They have described the experience as being important because it values their lived experience and shows that despite what we have been through, all of that experience becomes valid, that actually it's something that we should all be talking about.
The experiences described range from beautiful to frightening beyond comprehension. I heard of a girl who has to live with an angry voice screaming at her, slamming on her doors and walls 24 hours a day. I met someone who would often see hanging corpses in a room, so real that she would sometimes try to rescue them. The panic and fear that comes with such visions is entirely understandable, and it can be a living horror for some.
Worthless, weak, pathetic. Go on, feel sorry for yourself, because there is no one left to do that for you.
I was urged by one fellow that we should not shy away from showing this horror, and so I was perpetually torn in making Hellblade.
Ayuda a ponerte en su lugar, hay que decirlo.
Broken and lost, just like your soul.
Come on.
In some ways, voice hearing and visions were the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. There's another aspect of psychosis that is much harder to explain, but one that I think video games are uniquely able to represent, which are often called delusions.
People begin to see patterns in the world. They begin to link things that most people wouldn't link. Most of the things that we might think would be coincidence or, you know, not worth commenting on. Nevertheless, that might have a particular salience or importance for them.
One individual described how everyday words, sounds, colours and objects were steeped in meaning to him, forming a strange and sinister puzzle that he was determined to solve but could not quite get to the bottom of.
It's not just brain dysfunction. It's not like the system shut down. It's actually an incredibly creative process. The person creates a world populated with voices and phantasms and terrors, and they're completely immersed in it. They believe in it.
We often invite people into the studio to play the game. In one of our playtests, they played through much of the game, making associations between runes, secret messages, and the threat of darkness that stalked them. There are many things that happen in the world of Hellblade that make perfect sense within the context of Senua's mind. The dark rot that's killing her slowly from within, the secret runes of the gods that block her path to Helheim, and strange associations that exist in the game to confuse you. To complete Senua's quest, you have to internalize and accept the logic and meaning behind these things to progress. Afterwards, they said that they didn't see much evidence of mental illness in the game. People with delusions of all sorts would argue the same thing, that they are not aware of their experience being abnormal in any way.
I need this sword. It's important.
La mayoría de locos no saben que están
Representing
locos.
perception changes and thinking patterns within Hellblade gives us a set of symptoms common in psychosis. But people with lived experience were keen to emphasize another point, that it is wrong to define a person by
Igual que
their
el resto de
symptoms.
personas, lo que
Quite
vemos
often, the illness comes not
lo
from the
interpretamos
symptoms,
como la
but from the
realidad.
stigma, isolation and mistreatment that comes about from the rest of society.
They say that I'm cursed.
Cuando estás delirando no sabes que estás delirando.
What if they're right?
Una vez tuve delirios. Tenía
I needed someone to
40
portray
de
Senua,
fiebre.
someone who could believably
de pequeño.
internalize her suffering.
Yo no me acuerdo bien, pero mis padres dicen que deliraba y que veía cosas que no estaban ahí y que hablaba con gente que no estaba ahí.
Melina Jurgens, our video editor, had been a stand-in for Senua over a few months while
Mira,
we
usa Sony
perfected our
Vegas.
motion capture techniques.
Como yo.
Without realizing it, she had already auditioned for the role, and I knew her well enough to know that I didn't have to teach her to act,
Senua,
but to relive
Melina.
her own internal pain. As often is the case, those who have suffered mental anguish are never far from us. My hope is that by creating a compelling and aspirational character in Senua who feels very much real, albeit in a fantasy setting, we can provide a lens into her reality, a different one to yours, and this is where storytelling comes into play. I imagined her life based on common threads in real people's lives. She was always prone to psychosis as a child. Her mother Galina also heard voices and had visions, so perhaps there was a genetic
¿En
aspect.
serio? No me he fijado.
Or perhaps it was cultural as she lived within a world without science, of gods and superstition, as exemplified by her druid father Zimbel. Psychosis developed in her late teens to early 20s and was exasperated by stigma and isolation at the hands of the clansmen and her father.
This darkness. It's spreading.
The trauma of seeing her lover Dillian sacrificed tips her over the edge, making her remodel her reality around the concept.
Eso lo dije durante el gameplay.
The darkness. So the question is, what Senua experiences real? Can only be answered by saying, yes, it is real. It is her reality.
Es su realidad.
All of her suffering will have been for nothing. It's just a matter of time.
Towards the end of the project, service users and professionals that had collaborated with us were invited to see the near-final game. It was a chance to see if the game had reflected their views or if it had misrepresented them.
For me, being involved in especially developing Senua's character has been really important, and being able to bring in my perspective and what I see and what I hear, and having that built into the game has been a real privilege. It's gritty and it's meaty, and there are some tough subjects in there that are being tackled with honesty.
I was blown away by it today, absolutely blown away. It was just fantastic to get the opportunity to use our lived experience in a very creative way. There's nothing tokenistic about
No lo sé, Connie, no me acuerdo ahora mismo.
It feels like we've been
Igual estaba en la primera
listened
mitad.
to, things have been taken on board, and I think there was a lot of realism in the game itself, and it feels very authentic.
Dan su aprobación. Los pacientes de psicosis.
Hellblade will give people a good experience of what it's like to hear voices and have those experiences. I'm glad that the guys at Ninja Theory kind of asked us to come along and help them build an experience that's positive when it comes out, and get myself a copy and have a go.
I think all the way through I was really inspired by how the conversations have translated into the game in a way that I think I didn't imagine was possible. So wonderful, really wonderful.
Hostia, Bubi.
I really hope that others will follow the lead they've set and use the power of the video game to change people's perceptions, to increase understanding, and ultimately to make some of the stigma around voice hearing and other experiences go away.
For me, it was really exciting to see something that I explore scientifically being represented so beautifully in a character who's trying to penetrate the mysteries of the environment in which they've been placed, with all of this strange uncertainty and noise and conflicting information that they're getting. I'm very excited by this way of trying to represent mental illness, because I think it actually might be offering us insights that we wouldn't get from pure scientific explorations, and actually giving us quite an empathic view of what it might be like.
Mental illness has been with us for as long as we have been on this planet, but why? Why hasn't evolution stamped out this weakness from within our gene pool? I often pondered this question until I realized that the question had an inbuilt flaw. It assumes that being and thinking differently is a weakness. The only reason we have computers, spacecraft, medicine, poetry, art, and yes, even video games is because individuals are able to simulate new abstract realities in their minds and share them with the rest of us. We need people to be willing to see differently in order for us to progress and survive as society. And we need to be open to these new ways of seeing. And it is this spirit that motivated me to create Senua's story and share it with you.
Ahí tenéis la web, por si tenéis más curiosidad. Hellbladehelp.info. Uno de los objetivos de los desarrolladores era concienciar a la gente o informarles de lo que es en realidad la psicosis. ¿Vale? Hay gente que lo malinterpreta. Yo la verdad es que lo malinterpretaba un poco antes. Es muy interesante haber visto el documental este y haber jugado al juego. Es como decía Caramantes en el chat. Realmente el tema de las enfermedades mentales es muy ambiguo. Si no sufres una de estas enfermedades mentales es muy difícil entenderlo. O que te lo expliquen. Pero es como dicen en el reportaje, el hecho de que un videojuego sea una plataforma interactiva no es como el cine, que te sientas y lo ves. No es como un libro, que lo abres y lo lees. El juego tienes que jugarlo. Tú tienes el control. Y eso lo han sabido aprovechar muy bien en el juego, en mi opinión. Porque según donde miraras, según donde entraras, según la dirección que tomabas o lo que hacías, el juego reaccionaba de una manera u otra. Con mucho puedes comprender la enfermedad, pero no saber cómo se siente. Exacto, a eso me refiero. A eso me refiero. Es muy difícil. Pero el juego lo ha conseguido representar bastante bien. No con exactitud, evidentemente, es imposible. Debo reconocer que la parte de los símbolos flotando en el aire y las escenas donde se veían muchas caras y cosas cuando estaba sin la antorcha en la cueva me recordaba cuando tomé setas. Siendo sincero, trabajar temas tan delicados como las enfermedades mentales o racismos para educar de una forma entretenida e inmersiva es lo que puede cambiar el mundo. Por desgracia, mucha gente prefiere mantener su propia realidad sin aceptar la de otros, ocasionando muchas fobias o desprecio incluso sin bases sólidas y todas fundamentadas en la desinformación. Sí, es lo que decían, que querían acabar un poco con el estigma. Con este juego, con toda la investigación que habían hecho al respecto. Y sí, es lo que tú has dicho. Da gusto que eduquen de esta manera. Al principio del reportaje ha habido alguien que ha puesto en el chat, no recuerdo ahora mismo su nombre, pero ha puesto en el chat, ¿por qué no me enseñan estas cosas en el colegio así? ¿Sabes? Estoy sorprendido de cómo todo un chat puede entrar en una conversación tan profunda. Me alegro, debes estar feliz de los seguidores que tienes. Lo estoy. A mí también me ha sorprendido. A mí también me ha sorprendido. No sé, el chat de Twitch te sorprende. Puede ser lo más absolutamente retrasado e imbécil que existe en el mundo y al mismo tiempo una fuente de cultura y conversación, de debate. Luego termina y ya empieza otra vez el autismo. Para una vez que hay algo inteligente por estos lares y me lo pierdo. Los aprecio, y de graz. Este tipo de proyectos hará que nosotros, una nueva generación de personas, pueda aprender y reducir tantos malentendidos. Este tipo de cosas nos enseñan, pero me parece un tema interesante de debatir. Para entender las cosas es mejor con imágenes y sobre todo de forma entretenida e interactiva, que es lo que tienen los videojuegos, en mi opinión. Los videojuegos, a diferencia de un libro, de una película, de una serie, es que son interactivos. Conozco la esquizofrenia de cerca, pero un amigo mío me ha contado cosas que he visto reflejadas en el juego, pero como decía, alguien hace un rato se medicaba y hacía vida normal. Sí. Pasa que, digamos que en la época de Senua no había con qué medicarse, ¿no? Y luego si tenías encima la cultura de tu pueblo, te hacía aislarte en el bosque o en una cueva y sobrevivir ahí porque tenías una enfermedad mental, que es lo que decía, ¿qué nombre les ponía? ¿Los guild? ¿Los Gurt? Algo así. Lo han dicho al principio del reportaje. Que parece que en la cultura celta, a los que sufrían enfermedades mentales, los denominaban así, que era por lo visto como llamar a alguien maldito. Y una de las maneras de, digamos, arreglarle, de solucionar el problema, era aislarlo en el bosque. Lo cual, en muchos casos, imagino que podía incluso acentuar el problema. No lo sé.
Gracias por este juegazo. Buenas noches.
Cefigax, muchas gracias por los 100 bits. Buenas noches, tío. Un placer, como siempre. Me gusta compartir estas cosas con vosotros. Es uno de esos juegos que no me habría importado jugar por mi cuenta, ni muchísimo menos. Lo habría hecho seguramente tarde o temprano. Pero compartirlo con vosotros, sobre todo con la conversación que se ha creado al final, me ha molado bastante. Me ha molado bastante.